What is this that I can hear? Oh, yes, I can.
Oh, there it is.
The drinks trolley. Because Susie has another treat lined up for us. What is it that you can offer us today?
Well, there was sunshine in the air this morning, so it got me in a little bit of a spring feel. So how about a spring twist on a classic gin and tonic with an orangey Tanqueray in their Sevilla. So plenty of ice.
Yeah.
The single or double shot, however you feel.
Double, please.
And then a tonic with a wheel of orange as your garnish or a grapefruit slice.
Very good.
However you feel.
That's very poetic.
Yeah.
Very spring-like.
Very nicely done. Okay, so that while you're sipping on that, Donald has sent in today's tale. Father Simon, Brother Matt, and Sister Holly, Katie, Susie. I would like to bring to you my 12 certificate, by the way.
Oh, really? Good news.
A little bit of a 12, definitely. I'd like to bring to you my confession, which happened around 1982 in a time when daily newspapers were a thing, school teachers wanted an easy life, and the addresses for TV shows and the BBC was common knowledge. Back then, we were enthusiastic 11-year-olds in a strict Catholic middle school. The headmaster himself was the local priest. Our class teacher was a fine example of many teachers of that era who would expertly multitask by teaching Latin while smoking roll-ups at the front of the classroom.
Of course he did, yeah.
Wow.
To reduce his workload, we would have the most basic homework test at the start of each lesson. He would read out the questions, and then we would swap our tests with our classmates to mark. This is a fairly standard thing, obviously. And then he read out the answers. He would then give the test a quick glance over to make sure everything was in order. Myself and a few other pupils were what could be described as of a less academic persuasion. And he says, I'm sure Brother Matt will understand.
Yes, of course.
We were frequently being made to stay in detention time to relearn our homework. We were also made to sit right at the front of the class with our desks butting up to the teacher's desk deep in the clouds of tobacco smoke. And then we realised that if we filled in the answers on our friend's paper when we were doing the test, as we were marking it, we could get very good marks indeed. And our detention avoiding scheme was so successful that we had plenty more time available during and after school whilst waiting for music lessons and the like. And as we were now Mr. Wilson's most trustworthy and obviously academically smart pupils, even though we'd been cheating, the time available, we were the perfect choice to be allocated the task of tidying and sorting his huge sack of newspapers, which he collected to raise money for the guide dog, some sort of recycling money-back scheme, I think. What sounds like a tedious task of sorting newspapers was actually a highly sought-after job amongst many an 11-year-old boy, as in those days, several newspapers encouraged readership with interesting articles and pictures on page 3. And even better articles in the newspaper that specialised in the sport on Sunday, where almost every page had such articles and pictures. So one day we gladly set to work sorting out all these newspapers into neat and tidy piles. It was while doing this very tedious task that we came across a strange booklet of postcards, each with the title, "For your free brochure, please complete your details and return using the free post address," if you remember the free post addresses. So we thought, well, who wouldn't want a free brochure? Our mate John, who never gave us a decent mark in any of the tests, he would love a free brochure and a year's supply of junk mail, perhaps a few teachers, care of the school address, maybe the headmaster. And so we helpfully completed several addresses. After running out of easily to hand addresses, we moved on to celebrities and presenters of TV shows, mostly at the famous London W12 address,
yes, of course,
known by every child at the time who watched Saturday morning television. A couple of weeks passed and we'd completely forgotten about the postcards. That was until one morning when the usually unpopular John had a crowd around him and he was gleefully showing off his mail that had arrived that morning. A brochure. And unlike the Argus brochure, you didn't have to go through to the shower and bathroom section. In fact, you didn't have to open the brochure at all. There were many forgetful ladies in this magazine who'd forgotten to wear much.
Right.
The clothing that they had remembered seemed to be lacy and leather kind of thing. Although it did have, just like the Argus catalogue, a particularly large toys section, which to us at that time was less exciting and made us think being a grown-up would be particularly boring if that was the sort of toy that you played with.
Wow.
It's only now in my later years that I appreciate the need to confess and ask for forgiveness. Not for our results-fixing test process, because I believe this gave us confidence and taught us about fortune, rewarding the brave and taking opportunities in life. Maybe Holly's sister Katie thinks I should ask for forgiveness for the consequences of our actions that meant our Catholic headmaster had to try and explain to his secretary why he'd started receiving a regular supply of catalogues featuring adult leatherwear and other paraphernalia, addressed to him directly by name, no less. Although he was our cane-wielding headmaster, so I feel no forgiveness necessary. Different times.
Yep.
I do, however, feel I need to ask forgiveness to all the hard-working TV presenters at various TV stations that had their mornings interrupted by brochures that arrived, distracting them from all the hard work that kept us entertained on a Saturday morning. So I lay my confession over to you and your listeners to see if I get any forgiveness. Well, Donald has been up to
Donald.
no good, yes. And I suspect I could tell Sister Susie developing sternness as we went through. What do you say, Sister Susie?
Yes, Donald, you are pushing your luck. That's all I can say. And I will say, you don't need to ask forgiveness from the TV presenters, because I can tell you, they never saw those brochures. They probably went straight in the bin in the post office. However, you do need to ask for forgiveness for the fact that you cheated on the tests, for the fact that you ordered the brochures in the first place. You shouldn't be looking at that. You should be concentrating on what you need to do to pass your test. That's what you're there in school for, not for the other.
Wow.
And frankly, very childish behaviour, and I can't forgive you whatsoever.
Exactly. This is what we expected. Brother from another gutter.
I mean, of course, that's entirely reasonable. However, I mean, on the other side, none of us condone spam, obviously. But, if you're offered the opportunity of availing yourself of one of those catalogues and sending it to the headmaster, you're obviously going to take that. And obviously, the TV presenter's never going to see them. That's fine. And also, he was wielding his cane, wasn't he? What goes around comes around, sunshine. So here's your catalogue. And with your we don't need to go into details.
I'm going to send my junk mail to Matt.
What was in that catalogue?
Adult paraphernalia.
Yeah, well, we don't need to go into that. We don't need to go into that now. So for that reason, going to forgive.
Okay, so the thing is, does Donald get your forgiveness? That's the question. On the text, please, 61054, first word is Simon. Forgive. We had a 12 certificate confession from Donald and his schoolmates who sent racy catalogues to friends and teachers and celebrities. That's essentially it, with lots of references to lace and toys and various other things. What do we get from the people's verdict?
Not forgiven, says Sue. As Sister Susie says, the cheating on the test was bad enough, but then he set up many people to receive dodgy magazines. No forgiveness here. But Misha from Aberdeenshire says forgiven. I have a feeling that the headmaster would 100% forgive for getting such blessings in the mail. And Tim from Sutton Coldfield says, I think I'm going to forgive on this one, as I'm sure you and many of your listeners will remember the door-blocking amount of junk mail that landed in your post. I used to deliberately seal up these envelopes empty and send them back. This ensured employment for the post office and annoyed the senders right back.
If you have a confession, we would like to see it. You send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. If we use it, then you get a smart speaker. And hello, good evening. This is Greatest Hits Radio, and it's confession time. Don't forget, the Confessions podcast arrives on Friday, and the trolley is arriving right now. The drinks trolley being pushed and stocked by producer Susie from the pub. What have you stocked it today? What is your top recommendation?
Well, my top recommendation today is, as you say, Tuesday is the worst day of the week, so why not perk it up with an espresso martini?
I always think that sounds dangerous. You're like they're pushing in different directions.
It's all going off.
I just think
I would say one is fine. More than one, you don't need it.
Okay.
But one is indulgent and just enough.
Okay. Thanks for the top health advice as well. Going with that. Today
you can also have a non-alcoholic spirit in there, so that it's not.
Or just have a coffee.
Yeah, it's
there you
coffee.
go. That's what you can
Or
have.
have a gatto.
So today's confession comes from Tony. Father Simon, I write to ask forgiveness for a most heinous crime committed by myself and my wife, Becky, during the Easter holidays back in 2010. The said crime took place in our friendly, family-run local community cinema, where they had the exciting event of their first ever 3D movie screening.
Ooh.
Wow.
Being a couple of enthusiastic movie buffs, we were very excited about going along to the cinema to watch Clash of the Titans in 3D in a nice setting with like-minded people. What a great way to finish off our few days off at Easter. This is the movie that starred Sam Worthington as Perseus, Liam Neeson as Zeus, obviously. And Ralph Fiennes as Hades. Oh, my goodness me. Anyway, my wife and I are pretty organised people, and as usual for us, thought we'd arrive at the cinema nice and early to get good seats. When we entered the foyer of the cinema, we were greeted by a really impressive display of promotional memorabilia from various movies, including cardboard cutouts, signed pictures, mugs, and other cool stuff associated with the big screen. After stocking up heavily on treats to scoff during the performance, very bad at that. Really shouldn't do that. We made our way into the auditorium, and this is where unknowingly the beginnings of our criminal activity began. Upon finding the seats we deemed suitable, not too near the front or too near the back, we sat down and waited for the rest of the excited 3D film punters to arrive. Time ticked by and we still found ourselves sat alone as we had arrived so early. I started to get restless and thought I'd have a poke around the cinema out of sheer boredom. Wow, you really were early. In reality, there wasn't much to look at, but lo and behold, below a seat, I found a palm-sized Easter egg, still wrapped and ready for the taking. So palm-sized, that's pretty big.
Yeah, hefty.
As a self-confessed chocoholic, I hastily unwrapped the egg and started munching away, while at the same time having a further mooch around, and a few moments later, I called over to Becky, saying, "Look at this, someone has dropped more of their Easter eggs during an earlier film. They're all over the place. Little outs. In a way that only a couple of middle-aged," and then Tony uses the word skullduggerers.
Okay.
I'm not sure that's a word, but we kind of know what you mean, because you're up to skullduggery, meaning roguish intrigue from the Scots dialect term for fornication, which is not what we're talking about here.
No, we're not.
Anyway,
no.
Becky, just an interesting aside, I thought.
No, I don't think so.
Becky kept watch at the door, whilst I rapidly raced around the cinema, collecting a merry pile of eggs in my upturned jumper. Great, we thought. Even more treats for the film. Upon returning to our seats, the cinema began to fill up and we sat with wry little smiles, knowing that we had stopped anyone else from finding the chocolate booty left behind by the careless others. The lights dimmed and the owner of the cinema came in to give a lovely warm welcome to everyone and said how exciting it was to have their first 3D event at the cinema. Becky and I sat scoffing eggs and nodded in agreement. The owner then said she had a nice surprise for some lucky movie buffs who were in the audience. Could everyone look under their seats, please? And anyone who finds an Easter egg has won their pick from the memorabilia in the foyer.
Wow.
Becky and I sank in our seats. Our jaws, which were so merrily chomping on the chocolate eggs, slowed to a stop and beads of sweat began to form on our foreheads. The excited cinema goers were checking under their seats and coming back with no luck for me, or some other lucky devils have won at them. The film ensued, and for an hour and a half we pondered how we could get around our problem of the buoyant Easter egg haul sat under the coats on our laps. We lowered our 3D glasses, looked at each other and whispered our plan of action. The film credits rolled, and with the speed of Linford Christie, we made our bid for freedom. The foyer was ahead of us, and as fast as we could, we secreted our Easter egg treasure in every pocket that we could find, except for 2 Easter eggs. Becky's eyes were struck by the handsome life-size cardboard cutout of Sam Worthington, and Julie handed over her egg to the owner, who congratulated her. Next to it, it was my turn, and I went for a Liam Neeson signed photograph. Remember, he was Zeus. That was it. We'd done it. We were out of the door with our cardboard cutout, which we later struggled to fit in the car, and me with my signed photograph. Father Simon and the team, we beg you for forgiveness, not only for pinching the opportunity for excited movie-going crowd to enjoy a tasty Easter egg whilst watching a great film, not that great, but also for robbing them of the opportunity to take home some lovely goodies from the glamours of Hollywood. We also apologise to the cinema owner, who was probably highly puzzled as to why no one else was interested in her beautifully displayed memorabilia. Tony, it was an Easter egg hunt. That's what it was.
Of course.
It was an Easter egg hunt. Yeah. For heaven's sake, was there no point in that? We thought, maybe this is not left behind by people previously. This is for people who are about to come in. Greedy boy, Tony. Anyway, Sister Susie speaks first.
Now, Tony, I, like you, really rather like my chocolate. So I was with you for quite a bit of that. However, did you not realise after so many that there was something going on here? It wasn't just things that were left over. And I just don't know if for that reason I can forgive you. So I just, as much as I would have also done the same, Keeping watch at the door is where you lost me, and therefore not forgiven.
There are only so many palm-sized Easter eggs you can eat in one go, I would have thought. Brother from another go?
I'd give it a go. Obviously, after you've found the second or third Easter egg, it should have clicked at that point that this is an Easter egg hunt. This is not just people leaving them behind. That said, I'd have done exactly the same. I'd have taken as many as I can, because it's basically what they should have done, of course, is a picture of an Easter egg, because no one's going to nick that. If you just leave a picture under the Easter egg, then everyone gets an Easter egg, and then you can go out in the foyer and pick up your life-size Sam Worthingtons.
Don't go on one of your Easter egg
Yes,
hunts.
absolutely.
Yeah,
That's the way. Oh, and you don't tempt me with your chocolate. That would be my response there. So for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
Okay, right. So this is down to you. It's the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive Tony? Yes or no? 61054. First word is Simon. Before the news, we had an Easter egg confession from Tony and Becky, who basically went to the cinema. Clearly, there'd been some kind of Easter egg hunt planned, but they got there early and they stole all of them. They stole the eggs from the children. And
Children? We don't know that they were children.
Yes, well, let's assume that they're the children.
Right. Okay, let's assume that. Why not?
Anyway, the people's verdict is in. Here it comes.
So Tom in Torquay says, no forgiveness here. This was a confession of pure greed.
Yes.
Who eats chocolate they found left on the floor?
Well, that is actually also true, because it could have been laced with cyanide.
Well, it wasn't, and it wouldn't be. Okay, says Fiona the
Filth.
Chocoholic.
It could have filth on it.
Filth in your eggs.
Yes.
Fiona says, to lose 2 Easter eggs would be careless, but on discovery of the third, no, not forgiven. Scoffing the eggs and taking the goodies too, just no. But Mike says, forgiven. I am such a chocoholic and would have absolutely eaten any eggs in that cinema. It was a silly idea for the attendants to leave them unattended in the first place. Exactly.
Unnecessary.
Exactly.
Unnecessary. Chocoholic confessions, any kind of confession. Easter egg confessions. Send them to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. If we use yours, you get a smart speaker. 5:46 is confession time. The confession podcast, the brand new one, available on Friday. Here is Wednesday's confession. Another smart speaker to be handed out. Nigel is the recipient of this one. Sister Holly in the house. Mm-hmm. People wondering if you've been sacked, and I've been reassuring them.
No.
I'm just in the tack cupboard.
That's what you are. Mm-hmm. Nigel says, Simon team, Drive Time Confessional Collective. Do believe I'm probably one of your younger viewers. That's what he says. My tale of deceit goes back to when I was a young schoolboy, aged 7, in the year 2000.
Wow.
And as I reflect on that year, a time of transition and anticipation marked by fears of the Y2K bug and the dawn of the new millennium, I'm reminded of the quirky trends and popular pastimes that defined that era. From mastering the art of the Nokia 3310 snake game to the turn of the century brought with it a mix of excitement and uncertainty. I'll have to explain all of this
All of those.
later on. In the spirit of those times, I have a confession that's been weighing on my conscience since I was a mere third-year student back in the days when Pokemon games and Game Boys ruled the playground. You see, my brother had shared a story with me a few days prior, a tale of how he had stumbled upon a lost Pokemon game in the playground and instead of keeping it, being the noble soul that he is, returned it to our less-than-observant teacher, Mr. Sharp. Now, Mr. Sharp may have had a name that suggested sharpness, but in reality, he was about as sharp as a marble. Which is a sentence I will remember, I think. After my brother handed the game in, Mr. Sharp said he was going to reward him, but couldn't do it at the time, so sent my brother away in anticipation. I thought no more of it at the time, and appeared uninterested as well. It was my brother, and that's just what happened. However, my brother was very excited at the reward that he was going to get, whatever it was, and he wouldn't shut up about it. It was very annoying. Following that, about a week later, I was sitting in class getting on with my schoolwork on what seemed like a perfectly normal school day. However, it was anything but. Mr. Sharp unexpectedly and suddenly barged into the classroom and at the top of his lungs demanded that I share with the class what I had supposedly done the week before. "Nigel, tell everyone what you've done," he shouted. Caught off guard and with all eyes on me, I hesitated, feeling like a deer in headlights. My mind was racing. What could I have done? What possibly could Mr. Sharp want with me? And then it dawned on me. A memory sparked in my mind. The story my brother had shared the week before. It had to be that. It couldn't be anything else. So I took a gamble. And in that heart-pounding moment, I blurted out in the most unconvincing manner possible, I thought, that I had indeed found and returned the Pokemon game to Mr. Sharp, and I was due a reward. I thought to myself, this couldn't be what he was actually after. But I'd said it, and there was no going back. I mean, me and my brother didn't look anything like each other at all, so there was no way he could have confused us. But this was Mr. Sharp as a marble, you'll remember. Well, to my utter disbelief, Mr. Sharp not only believed me, but praised my supposed act of honesty. He said, "Nigel, what house are you in?" Well, nervously I replied, "Valiant House, Mr. Sharp." He then declared that I had earned our schoolhouse a whopping 50 points.
Ooh.
50 points to Gryffindor. I mean, Valiant. Now, you must understand that these points were no trifling matter. They determined which house reigned supreme. And naturally, I belonged to the illustrious Valiant House, the finest house. The school was divided into 4 houses: Valiant, Petunia, Graphite and Morris.
Graphite.
I think Valiant.
Petunia Morris. I mean, what?
I think Valiant is definitely the best house
It
to be
is.
in.
Who wants to be in Petunia?
With a
anyway?
quarter of the school in each house. I didn't normally keep track of which house was currently winning, but this changed everything. As it turned out, my fib led to a sweet victory for my housemates, as the 50 points rocketed us up to first place. And being near the end of the school year, it was now impossible for any other house to catch up. My fellow housemates were treated to a well-deserved reward, all thanks to a lie I shamefully claimed as my own. My brother was in another house, so he didn't get any points at all. What I got? Well, the reward was a school disco full of chocolate and fizzy drinks and amazing 90s school disco music, a child's dream. A few weeks later, it was time for the disco. All the teachers were present, and I remember seeing the sad look on my brother's face as my mum picked him up, and my sister took him home from school and went back home, and they didn't have a party. As I entered the hall, I was greeted with a tremendous cheer by all my other student chums. I partied all night long, getting drunk on lemonade and getting high on chocolate. When I say all night, it was till 6:30,
obviously.
because the teachers wanted to go home. Please, Father Simon and the team, please absolve myself for this childhood deception and set the record straight. I ask forgiveness from Mr. Sharp as a marble, although I was 7. I also ask forgiveness from my brother, as I had stolen his glory and kindness and branded it my own. And I ask forgiveness from the quarter of the school, actually 3/4 of the school, who missed out on the reward, as I know all of them had worked so hard for the points. I think this is now sounding a little bit desperate at the end there, Nigel, but let's see how it turns out for you. Sister Holly, back with a stern face, I think.
Absolutely, yes. I feel very, very sorry for Mr. Sharp in all of this. You know what? He teaches hundreds and hundreds of students, and it's very difficult to remember every single person's name. And so really, in that moment where he said, "What have you done, Nigel?" you could have just, I don't know, stayed silent, or maybe said, "Oh, I don't know what you're talking about," and corrected him. But no, you didn't do that. You lied and said that you picked up the Pokemon game, and then managed to reap all of those rewards of the disco and the house points, and your poor brother got nothing. So for all of those reasons, not forgiving at all.
However, Brother Matthew.
Well, I feel sorry for Mr. Sharp's students because he sounds pretty thick. Also, I mean, what did he gain by this? All he gained 50 house points, which don't exist.
And a disco.
Well, he got a disco. Well, they're probably going to have the disco anyway. And for the house of Valiant against Petunia and
Graphite.
Rainbow Trout and shall we? Mr. Sharp as a teacher. That's what kind of school. So for that reason, I'm going to forgive, because it's obviously the system's fault again. So yeah.
How have you ended up?
Yeah. Move on.
I don't.
Yeah.
Okay, I am going to move on. I'm definitely going to move
Graphite.
on. I would like to have been in Petunia House. I think
Really?
that sounds fantastic. Anyway,
I think so.
it's the people's verdict, please, on Nigel's confession. Do you forgive Nigel? Yes or no? 61054. Just before the news at 6 o'clock, you had a confession from Nigel. There's another school confession. He was confused by one of his teachers for his brother, and he won 50 points for his school house. Actually, his brother should have got the points. He was in a different house. Consequently, Nigel won the school disco, won all the lemonade and the chocolate, and being able to stay up and party till 6:30 in the evening. Anyway, a shocking tale of lies and shame What does the public
Indeed.
say?
Well, not forgiven, says Lynn in Torquay. I agree with Holly. Mr. Sharp has hundreds of students to remember, so can easily forget each student's name. Tom says not forgiven. The poor brother. He received no treat or reward for his good work. Correct. May as well have kept the Pokemon game. But Mark in Reddit says, totally forgiven. Having been mistaken by a teacher on a school skiing trip for my younger brother, who'd broken his wrist on that trip. I completely agree with Matt.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for all the verdicts. If you have a confession, if we use it, you get a smart speaker. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Before we do Thursday's confession, of course, we need to choose something from the trolley.
Oh, yes.
There goes the drink trolley. What should we be grabbing as it goes past, Sister Susie?
Well, this one's just for Matt. It's a big bottle of Old J spiced rum.
Oh, bit of rum on a Thursday.
Drink it neat, or you can have a ginger beer or Coke, whatever you prefer to have.
Bit of Coke, that'll be lovely.
Is that what you're having?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. There's drink responsibly, everybody.
Obviously.
Today's confession comes from Arcala. To Simon, the holy sanctuary of extreme penance and the collective of forgiveness. I should say today's confession is somewhat eye-watering.
Oh, really?
Yes.
In a good way? Well, find out.
Is it?
No, not really, no.
Right.
This is a story going back to the late 1980s and has remained so far within the confines of the hallowed halls of Larch Hill, the National Scouting Centre in Ireland, not far from Dublin's fair city. I was in my 20s and had been collared to join the local scout troop as a leader. I have to say, I caught the bug and was surprised just how much I enjoyed the Saturday meetings, the outdoor football with the 7 to 11-year-old cubs, and not forgetting the bi-monthly hikes around the hills and dales of the Wicklow Mountains. Eventually, though, and 6 months into my tenure, to continue as a leader, I required the Wood Badge Leaders Qualification. To that end, I was dispatched to join my fellow recruits for a training long weekend in Larch Hill National Scouting Campsite. This is a 17-hectare site of fields, trees, rivers and hiking trails, and approximately 226 metres above sea level. That's enough information for now. Literally, it's in the middle of nowhere. The nearest pub was in Tibraden, which is about a 15-20 minute hike from the lodge, down through a forest and a very dark country lane and a well-known watering hole for any scouting visitor worth their salt. Okay. Therefore, it was a case of getting on with your fellow leader recruits or else. This is important. Most of the leaders were looking forward to meeting fellow leaders, eager to share experiences, learn new ideas, and with a merry mixture of male and female attendees, the banter flowed from our check-in arrival on the Thursday night. A few of us decided that on Thursday to head to the pub and get a quick one in before the course started the following day. When we arrived in the pub, we were joined by, let's call him Cedric. Now, Cedric, we were led to believe that night, was a commissioner, one of the higher-ranked leaders in a coach for the weekend, as he gave this impression by reprimanding us for being in the pub at all on the first night with curfew at 11 p.m. and suggested we hightail it back to the lodge or get penalised. So regretfully, we all left minus any alcohol, and I guess this was Cedric's first step in the wrong direction. The following day, we realised as he joined us for breakfast that Cedric was actually a trainee leader and on the same course as the rest of us. We were furious. Cedric continued to be an irritable pain throughout Friday and Saturday by being very smarmy at Friday night's dinner with all the ladies. By the Saturday lunchtime, both the male and female attendees had had enough of Cedric. It was a cool November Saturday afternoon when we were introduced to the fun of orienteering and taken around the lodge estate, basically a 3-hour hike, during which time a few of us ladies decided how much fun it would be to collect holly, for which the estate had an abundant growth, and to stuff some of the holly into each of the lads' sleeping bags.
Okay.
I mean, ouch. The holly was collected, carefully distributed into each male sleeping bag by me and 2 other ladies while Annie kept watch. We then decided to wait for the ouches and the oohs as the lads retired. However, lights out was sounded and most of us turned in, and there was a disappointing silence from the male dorm. They'd obviously found the holly, so the shrieks we had anticipated just did not happen. However, what transpired was definitely of a whole different affair, and it is this that I seek forgiveness for, as our holly started the Dominoes of Carnage. Good name for a band. As I said earlier, by the Saturday night, the lads had got fed up with Cedric's behaviour over the weekend and had decided to sort him out. The dormitory had bunk beds, and Cedric, being Cedric, had collared a top bunk, even though it had belonged to another guy, who on this night had moved to the camp bed, as the rest of the lads had decided to loosen the screws on Cedric's bunk bed just enough. And as for all that holly, they put all of it into Cedric's sleeping bag. What we ladies did not know was that Cedric that night decided to try and chat up one of the girls, and by the time he went to bed, the lights were definitely all out, and because he slept without pyjamas, stripped and jumped into the open sleeping bag full of holly on a loosened bunk bed, and the whole lot came crashing down. Eye-watering? I think so. The roars from Cedric that night woke the actual commissioner, a man who most definitely needed his sleep, and who was decidedly not impressed at the commotion that was taking place as he roared for quiet and about the potential repercussions. We, both ladies and gents, all bit our lips for fear of the laughter escaping, with quite a few expletives thrown in for good measure. The next morning when we came down for breakfast, Cedric was nowhere to be seen and was gone from the lodge. So I'm not asking for forgiveness from Cedric. With his attitude, smarminess and irritation, he deserved it. Nor for awakening the commissioner. I heard later he chuckled when the bones of the story leaked the following day. And happens to be a legend in Larch Hill to this very day. But I'm asking forgiveness for the Cubs, who had to endure a leader who was not trained particularly well that weekend. Well, names have been changed for protection. Arcala's confession, interesting Irish scouting story, an awful lot of holly, and a very painful experience for Cedric. What do you say, Sister Susie?
Well, Arcala, do you know what? I don't think you did anything wrong here. I think, Cedric didn't sound like he was a particularly nice person, and I know you're asking for forgiveness for the Cubs, but hey, Cedric must have learnt something that weekend that led to being a good leader, and maybe he didn't stay there for very long, so you don't need to ask for much forgiveness anyway, so I am going to give it you.
Obviously, don't loosen the screws on anyone's
Obviously,
well, no,
don't do that.
chairs
But
or
she didn't
bedding.
do that. That
was the guys. That was the guys.
That's true.
No, you're absolutely right. Brother Matthew.
I think we can all agree that Cedric had it coming, not least for his behaviour in the pub the night before, but also for being a bit of a sleaze. And all this. Also, who sleeps naked when with everyone else? That's a bit weird, I think. It's a bit like what we've already established, never get naked at work, going for a shower. That's very weird. So,
fire alarm?
Well, yeah, exactly. What if there been a fire? Quite right.
I mean, the main thing is, it's November.
It is, yes.
Wear pyjamas.
Well, but what's wrong with wearing pyjamas? A little bit too continental for my taste. And for that reason, I'm going to forgive, because, yes, he had it coming, didn't he? Yeah.
Okay, so do you forgive Arcala, yes or no, for our scouting confession tonight? On the text, please, 61054, start your message with Simon. Forgiveness or no for Arcala? Just before 6 o'clock, we had an Irish Scouting Leaders Weekend confession from Arcala about a chap called Cedric who made himself so unpopular he ended up in a sleeping bag of holly and a dismantled bunk, leaving to painful collapse, and the people's verdict is in.
So Mitch says not forgiven. Lying on holly leaves as the bed collapses sounds painful. Ouch. Josh says forgiven. As Matt says, who sleeps naked when you're in the same room as other people? Absolutely no. Deserves everything he got. But Richard in Leeds says definitely forgiven. As a slightly mature scout leader, I can still remember my own leaders telling me of the pranks, stunts and other shenanigans they got up to in their youth.
Thank you very much indeed for all of those. And if there is a confession in your heart and you can put it onto paper, send it on an email and send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.